Vicki Beckman to talk about some interesting looking glass.
All right,
Vicki?
Thank you all for coming out today. I'm not conceited enough to think it was for my presentation. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
I'm getting an echo because I'm elderly and I wear hearing aids, and I got water in my ears this morning, so, but I did wash my hair for you, so be happy. Anyway, this is going to be part one of the Crackle Glass presentation. Due to the weather, and we weren't sure how many people were going to come, and I didn't want to bring a whole bunch of heavy boxes, and there were 5 people here, so we didn't have a speaker for next month, so I will continue on and I'll have the bigger pieces next month. So, Crackle Glass. About 10 years ago, I started getting interested in mid-century glass. About 6 years ago, before we took an overnight bus trip to the Amana colonies, Michelle and I decided to go and see if it was worthwhile for our club to go to Amana. So we were running around the shops in Amana, and I said, Michelle, look at the prices on this Crackle glass. Not because they were so low, but because they were so high. And I was shocked, and I said, is this like an Iowa thing? Are they really into Crackle glass? And I think that might have been the beginning of Crackle glass getting pricey. So whenever I would see something small, like this little pitcher, for $2 or $3 or $4, I would just snap it up. And that was kind of the start of my interest in Crackle glass. So one of the things I learned about Crackle that I found really interesting, I just assumed it was mid-century, but that's when it started. But it actually goes all the way back to the 16th century. And the Venetian glass designers were the first, they took the credit for developing the Crackle technique. Then in the late 1800s, early 1900s, the process was copied at other places, mostly in Europe, and became very popular. 2 of the major companies in Europe, and I think everybody knows, are Moser and Latz, or Lotz, I don't know how to say it. I've been to the Moser store, but not in Prague, but not the Moser Museum. The Moser store is fabulous. At the same time, in the US, Steuben, Imperial, and Fry were some of the companies that started doing Crackle. And at the time, they considered the pieces to be art, and they were extremely expensive. I don't know what expensive means for that time. I don't know if a vase might cost $50 or if $25 was expensive, but they were very expensive. Those pieces were often attributed to Mount Washington glass. Mount Washington never made Crackle. I have never in person, Justin, you probably have, Carmen, you probably have seen some of the Moser pieces that I saw in a catalog. So they're the clear Crackle. They might have fish on them. They might have flowers on them. They are incredibly beautiful. And I'm sure today they probably sell for $600, $700, $800, $900. Then the West Virginia companies got interested. Fenton did some Crackle, but it was mostly companies like Bischoff, Pilgrim, Blanco, and Rainbow that started crackling in the 40s and 50s, and then Conowa came along and started doing it in the 50s. Conowa was one of the companies that also did satinized Crackle, and I don't have any satinized Crackle in my collection, and if anyone is interested, my birthday is October 26th. You want to write that down. So the process for Crackle was funny because I thought about it this weekend. Part of the reason I didn't want to bring everything was I needed help putting one of the containers in my car, and with the cold weather, I didn't want the crackle to really crackle. So I just took what I could carry today, because I didn't want to, even though my car's in a garage, I thought, well, this probably isn't very smart getting this in here ahead. So the process to get the crackle: the hot piece of glass is dipped in a 55-gallon drum of cold water. That causes the glass to crack. So if I had this piece sitting up on the mantle and there was a heat source, let's say a fireplace underneath, and it was keeping it nice and warm and it was not crackled, and I put it in my car in cold weather outside for 2 or 3 days, I might have my own piece of crackle glass. After that, depending on let's see, let me read my notes here. So the temperature of the water, how long it's left in the water, controls the size of the cracks and the number of fractions in the glass. So one of the things I learned that I found really interesting, so you can see this one maybe has at the bottom, has bigger, little bit bigger cracks. What I read was Blanco had stopped making big pieces because it was too easy for it to actually break. And so if they took a big piece like this, tried to start crackling it, they really had to babysit it to be sure that they wouldn't get an exploded piece of glass. So then the crackled piece goes into a reheating furnace at about 2,500 degrees. Then the glass goes to the finisher and to be formed. Finally, it goes into an annealing oven through several hours of slowly reducing heat. Inspected and ready to be labeled and boxed. One of the things too is that, a lot of times we'll say, okay, so this has a pontil mark, right? And well, then this must mean that it's hand blown. That's true, but in crackle glass, it could be that there's a pontil, and if that's mold blown without seams, that also might have a pontil. One of the things I read was that Blanco, and again I'm going to go back to they don't want to do the smaller cracks for the length of time it takes for it to crackle. They're known for their larger cracks. So this piece though, somebody got it dirty. I don't know how you did that. This piece actually has smaller cracks in it for a big piece. But this is a Blanco piece. I don't have it in my notes, but I've got it at home. I have a piece that I thought was Blanco, and one of these other copies, it was either Rainbow or Bischoff, copied some of the types of things that Blanco was doing. It's not an exact copy for copy, but they did. So, a couple of things that notes. I need an assistant who knows what they're doing. Okay, so colors. I'm gonna lift this one up. What color would you guys call this?
Yellow. It's orange. Yellow.
Okay, so I call this yellow, and there are companies that made a color called yellow, but they also made called lemon or yellow. Some of the amethyst I find is different. So, is this amethyst?
Brown.
Maybe.
Amber.
Is this, I meant to say amber, I'm sorry.
That's it.
Amber.
Amber.
Yellow fading into amber, I would say.
Amber.
Amber,
They also called, they also had colors called honey, and what's another weird, somebody keeps moving my notes around. Topaz. Now if you look at it, is it amber or topaz?
Right as
Yeah, I think they're very close. And I'll bring a piece next month that I was told when I bought it by the dealer that it was apricot. Nowhere have I seen apricot as a color. Colors that are hard to find are brown. Now I have a piece at home that's much more brown than this. So could this be honey? I don't know. I don't know. And this is almost the same color. The brown piece that I have almost looks like a dark amethyst, but when you look at it really close, it's brown. So the colors that are hardest to find, brown, pink, and I didn't bring a pink. This is considered cranberry, also supposedly hard to find. Light blue, although I think this may be a reproduction. Cobalt blue, light amethyst, I would say this is a darker amethyst, that's more like a plum. Cranberry, Vaseline, I don't have any pieces that glow, that are crackle, and charcoal. I'll bring a piece of charcoal next time. When you put the charcoal next to the amethyst and the purples, you think you're looking at amethyst or purple. If you move it aside, you can see the gray in it. The most expensive colors to produce, did I bring one? Amberina, cobalt blue, ruby red, and cranberry. I found this interesting when they said ruby red, because I would consider this, I don't know if this is red or ruby red, but I find it's actually an easy color to find. So it's more expensive to produce, but there seems to be a lot of it out there. Also, anything that has two colors on it. I have found that interesting in my shopping. This actually, I thought had a little stopper, but I must have left it in there. This has a blue stopper as well. These were not expensive, but again, you're looking at a book and it's what their experience. For me, the two hardest things to find have been the baskets. And I have one creamer and sugar set. I'll bring that next week. So here's a blue basket. This would be a hard color. And then of course the little lemon. I don't know why the baskets are, if it's because the handles broke off or why. Well, think of our old friend Mel, who always said, don't pick a basket up by its handle. If the handles came off or they just didn't make as many of them. It's the same thing with the cream and sugar sets. And I also have not found a lot of hats. I have a lot of them, but I haven't, they don't jump out at me saying, oh gosh, look, there's a Crackle hat. These little pinched ivy vases, and this is what I love about Crackle, where you put it under a light, and it's so pretty. And these patio lights by Viking, these I think are easy to find. I have amber, I also have this in green, and I also have the pinched vase in green. Couple different companies did the pinch vases. I think I've shown you today. That's probably all we're going to do. I wanted to honor the Packers and be sure you could get home in time for the Packer game and not be squirming around in your seat because I wanted everybody to pay attention to what I was talking about. Can I answer at this point? Yeah.
After the process properly done, does the crackle compromise the piece at all?
I'm sorry.
Does the crackle compromise the piece?
Is it in danger
Oh.
of breaking?
No?
Not in my experience.
The water doesn't like it.
I think it's once it gets, I think it's managing the time, right?
Sure.
Once it's done and back in the heat, it's sealed. Right, I think my guess would be when it goes from the hot to the cold for the first time, but that's when it would break. Same thing if you think about, like I said, take a worn piece from your house, put it in your car, and see if you have a piece of crackle glass in
How
this
long
below
does it
zero.
stay in the cold water?
I don't know if I had that in my notes,
It's
honestly.
very good.
I'll go back and look, but,
You didn't say.
I don't think I had that in my notes. Just says, temperature of the water and length of time in the water controls the size of the cracks. The other thing that I didn't mention is the movement of water. They'll move the water with a hose, and that can help the cracks become more even. Yeah, it doesn't say. I have a couple books, I'll look in my book for next time. Are there other questions anybody has? Yes?
I've heard you say somewhere that like if they crackle it and then they formed it, is that?
Yes.
So it's
That's
crackled
what they
before
said.
it's,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought that was
I thought that's
interesting.
interesting, I think the
Yeah.
pieces are made and then crackled, but.
Yeah.
It was really cool.
Well, and you think about, okay, we're gonna make this big piece, and I've gotta worry the whole time, is my plan at the end to make a vase?
Yeah.
I don't know, and then to put attachments on the vase. This is the other thing I would say, other than the really old crackle and the two colored stuff, I seldom see clear crackle.
I've never seen
Kind of weird, it's like,
I have a bowl that's yeah, when I look at it, it's kind of weird because the top is very nice looking, but then it kind of tapers down one middle so much so that it almost looks like it would be like in a candle holder, you know,
Yeah.
I can bring it in and show
yeah,
you.
yeah. I've got a couple pieces that didn't pack them, maybe I'll throw one in next time, but they're candle holders, but they're in a metal stand. So there are two of them and they're kind of an avocado, and I thought, are those married pieces or are they European? You guys might know if they're European. I suspect I have a couple of pieces that are reproduction. What I read was that there's more of a smoothness to a reproduction piece. I mean, I can feel a little bit of the crackle on this. It's just that I have a couple of other light blue pieces, and this is a much lighter blue, which makes me feel like maybe the color that I have the most of is the turquoise. And if you are somebody who looks at crackle glass, you might see that all over the place. I have a whole shelf that's just the turquoise crackle. Best
Is
face.
European crackle glass valued more than the American?
I think so, because I don't know if they can, Moser might have continued to make it, but the pictures of the Moser that I saw, I have like a crackle glass book that's 1 and 2. And the second book is when they've got the pictures of the Moser that's clear with the decoration on it. That's very expensive, and I don't know if they still make it or not.
And how do you know if it's European made or American, especially if it doesn't have a label?
You know, I think what I had said about that Mount Washington, they attributed some to Mount Washington, and then they found that they never made it. So it's possible that some of the older American companies, that did it earlier, like Steuben and Fry, possibly. They had some pieces like that, but of the pictures that I've seen, those are all European with the really ornate decorations on them. They're beautiful.
A lot of times it's by shape, known shapes that companies produce.
Yeah. Well, what I found is Pilgrim, Bischoff, Rainbow, a lot of crossover. You could hold up a piece and say, what company made this? And unless you knew, you know, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. It's hard to know which company it was. Other questions I can answer?
Maybe it's just the vantage point here, but it appears from here that the crackle tends to be lower in the piece. Is that just the way I'm looking at it? I mean, when you hold that one up to the light, maybe it's just crackle at the top.
Yeah, a lot of them. Now this one even too, right at the top. It might be as they form it.
Yeah, it could be.
Density.
Or maybe it's that because it's formed after, so it
Yeah.
has to be.
So you think it was
Yes.
formed after with the same glass that the crackle would be even all the way through it, but.
So this one's got a little, tiny little bit. This almost, now that I look at it closer, this could be overshot. You guys familiar with overshot glass? So basically overshot glass, my understanding, because I'm not familiar with it, instead of crackling, they take the glass and they run it over broken pieces of glass. And then that makes the little bumps in it. If I look at it, that's not a true crackle. So it's probably, I just noticed that. See, I learned something today. And this is probably overshot. And I know I was looking, actually it's ironic because I was looking to see if any of my pieces might be overshot. And I kept seeing crackle in most of them. Other questions? Well then, go pack, all you need is love.
Thank you, Vicki.